Hello, and welcome to Electrifying Growth, a podcast brought to you by Edison Partners. I'm Chris Sugden, the managing partner here at Edison and your host. There are moments in a person or company's journey that are undeniably electric. The spark or sparks, if you will, that propel you or your company to new heights. With Electrifying Growth, we're here to have in-depth, real conversations with great leaders who have been there and done it before. Edison has been investing in high-growth technology companies for more than 35 years, and I have been here at Edison doing this investing piece for more than 20 years. We've led over 225 investments. We understand that it takes great leaders and visionaries to build market leaders. We are your support system, a CEO and management's entourage, if you will. Let's introduce this episode's guest. On this episode of Electrifying Growth, I'm really excited to be joined by a return guest. That's the voice and vision that, to me, always leaves a lasting impression on the audience, and that is John Hope Bryant. John Hope is the founder and chairman and CEO of Operation Hope. John is a leading voice on financial literacy, economic inclusion, and what he calls silver rights, the idea that economic opportunity is the next frontier of the civil rights movement. Under his leadership, Operation Hope has helped more than 4 million people gain access to financial coaching, credit improvement, and tools for building lasting wealth. John sits at the intersection of grassroots impact and global influence. He has served as an advisor to U.S. presidents from both parties, led initiatives that have reshaped how communities access capital, and has been recognized as one of the Time magazine's 50 leaders for the future. He's also the author of multiple best-selling books and a relentless believer in the promise of America for everyone, starting with financial literacy. In this episode, we bring John back to discuss what he calls his business plan for America, which we'll post on Electrifying Growth, but a perspective on leadership, mentorship, and the role of business leaders in helping close the financial literacy gap in America. Whether you're running a company, building a team, or raising a family, his message is clear. No one succeeds alone. You don't build real wealth without lifting others along the way. So with that, we welcome John Hope Bryant to Electrifying Growth. John Hope Bryant, welcome back to Electrifying Growth. Thanks for joining me again.
Appreciate being with you, and you're a good guy. I was told by your producer that you don't walk on water, but you know where the stones are. So
I'll take that. You know, we got together a couple of years ago. You spoke at our annual meeting. Phenomenal. You know, kind of crowded a lot of people. I don't want to say by not so much the throat, but by the heart in a way. But talked about a lot of business, culture, politics. It all kind of comes together in your message. But to give us all an update on what you're up to, because Operation Hope is one thing, but there's many things. And also you have this business plan for America, which I think a lot of people maybe have been to your website, which we'll, of course, post this episode. But bring us up to date. What's been going on the last year or two? And certainly lots changed in the political world, but what about your business world?
Oh, little things like trying to save America and trying to inspire the world with hope and hope with a business plan. I mean, I just think we're sitting in a moment in history. I said that at your meeting, but you could rightly have said at your meeting, yeah, well, I guess he's saying that everybody can make a difference. But now, if I said the same thing, I think everybody would largely agree that's absolutely true. It doesn't matter what your political view is. It doesn't matter whether you're white or black or rich or poor or Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal. What's true is that everything's on the table, and we're sitting in a moment in history. And what we do collectively now will determine quality of life and life itself, meaning the environmental issues, et cetera, quality of life issues, and all kind of decisions for the next 50 to 100 years. And you combine that timeline, even the most conservative one, 50 years, with how quickly the world's going to change with AI, artificial intelligence, and everybody's sort of biting at the bit, everybody in the world biting at the bit to take America's place at the seat as the global superpower in the world. I mean, there's 3 countries that absolutely won our seat: China, Russia, 4 countries, North Korea, and Iran. They won our seat, and they can't win in a fair fight. So they got to cheat at it. And they hope that even if cheating doesn't work, they hope that we just get into a food fight in America and we shoot ourselves in the collective foot.
We are seeming to indulge on that one, which we'll come back to. But when you say China can't win in a fair fight, let's double click on that for a minute. I'm with you on Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They've got to really cheat. And maybe China can cheat in its own way, being a communist country versus non-communist country. But tell me about your view of why China needs to cheat, if you will. Do we go to the tariffs or something else?
Well, they shouldn't want to cheat, but they literally steal our patents. They literally have stolen our intellectual property rights. I'm not like exaggerating.
Nope.
And this is not even getting to the point about what their problem is. I'm just saying they cheat. They literally take our ideas and they're great at copying, and they then copy them and then they perfect them and then they sell them back to us. But here's the problem that China has. None of that's the problem. And by the way, I think it's been absolutely proven at this point that COVID came from China. And
Right.
and I personally don't think it was an accident. I think that when you have a country that's hooked on freedom like we are, like the Middle East, someone in the Middle East wanted our way of life in 9/11 because they know we're hooked on freedom and free movement and all this stuff and free. And so they literally tried to destroy of capital, New York City. They literally tried to destroy and disrupt that movement for us so that we would stall. And I think that COVID was, if plan A didn't work, let somebody else try plan B. And if you could immobilize America, because the economy is 70% consumer spending, people don't know that, the largest economy in the world, and lock up our freedom, how long would we survive without oxygen? I don't think that's far-fetched at all. I think it's very rational. They didn't realize it was going to backfire on them in China, but that's not even my point. My point is that the Bible suggests that a house divided cannot stand. That's my point. So either be a communist country or be a free enterprise capitalist country. But you can't be a communist dictator almost led country. I mean, I'm being nice. You can't be a communist country with no free flow of information or anything, and at the same time be about free enterprise and capitalism and expect that to work out. You're literally having and moving in different directions. You want everybody to be creative until you don't.
Yep.
You want everybody to be wealthy until you don't.
Until they're too powerful.
And then you shut them up. And then that just a stifling effect for everybody else.
Right.
You want investments from outside until you don't. Like how those investments from the outside look or act, and then you put people in jail and you confiscate their assets. And let's see how that, until recently, little known fact, if we had more time in the interview, I would tease this out, but I'm going to cut to the chase and give you the answer. Until recently, I would tease my really smart friends and ask them, like, what are the riots in the U.S.? And they say, oh, the Rodney King riot, where Operation Hope was founded after, and you got the George Floyd's riot, you got the Watts riot. Like, they're so rare, you can, like, name them.
You can remember them, right, right.
And so I would say, well, how many times do you think there's been a riot in China or a massive civil disturbance? And they'd say, oh, never. Tiananmen Square. They'd say, oh, Tiananmen Square. And then when I told them up until 2 years ago, it was 200,000 a year, they would dang near pass out. And I'd say, look, don't trust me. Just go to whatever conservative outlet you like as a source and confirm it. That China's got more internal policing
Unrest.
than they have internal security than they got external military, because they feel their threat
Right.
is from the inside.
Yep.
And so people in China are just not, this is a generalization, they're just not happy. Who would be happy with somebody literally controlling every
Telling you
step?
what to think, what to do, what you're allowed to go.
Yeah. And I've been to China countless times. I'm not talking like somebody who's uninformed. I mean, I've been to China and I've been at the World Economic Forum meetings where some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in China have told me after a couple drinks, I don't drink, but they did, in the evening, we admire America. Why? What do you mean? Oh my God, you got this soaring constitution, this Bill of Rights, the rhetoric for freedom, and people can say what they want, do what they want. This is amazing, this country you've got, and we don't. Now, of course, this is all you can't subcontract your democracy, and you can't say, well, it's always going to be what it's always been, so we're going to keep fighting for this wonderful balance that we have in this country. But China, if you want to look at how China's doing, look at where their wealthy go, or Russia, or Iran, or North Korea, to lesser degree. They bring their money here. If they can get here, they've investing in New York real estate or wherever, real estate here, stock market here, like we're the flight to quality for the whole world. And that's just the truth. And so they shot themselves in the foot, and their economy is stalling. They have the biggest real estate bubble in the world, in my opinion. They literally have ghost cities.
It's true. Not your point about COVID. Yeah. It was pretty timely when you think where their economy was. It was like a look over there moment, right?
Yeah.
This is an interesting pivot, though, to us. You use the word food fight.
And by the
Like
way, I
we,
want China to be successful, just to be clear. I'm not hating on China.
no, it's a fact.
I just don't think they have a good business
They
plan.
want to respond as the global hegemon. And most of us don't want that to happen.
I just don't think their business plan will work at scale sustainably.
You know, Biden kept the tariffs, the Trump tariffs on China. So we agreed that they were not playing fair, but we have a hard time calling them, I hate to say our enemy, but it's a fact. They want our spot in the world. Why do you think, it seems like more recently we can all agree, but the powers that be have a hard time agreeing on who the enemy is?
Well, at the moment, the enemy is us. I mean, everybody wants to be an American, but Americans.
Your whole theory, and if I tie this to business now, you believe that everyone has that shot to success in this country. I'm saying in my words.
It's not that I believe it. I mean, again, I hope the people in your listening to your podcast don't pass out 4 times with things that I'm saying. I hope they're sitting down and don't fall down. But when I tell people that, like, the Republican Party platform, and I've served Republican and Democratic presidents as an advisor, by the way, I've been honored by presidents from both parties. 5 presidents have recognized our work. I've served 3. But it was Abraham Lincoln and the founding of the Republican Party. The Republican Party's mantra when it was founded was basically freedom of slaves. There's not even an exaggeration. It's 1840-ish. Their platform was essentially freedom of slaves. That this is not, the continuation of this is not good for the country. And the freedom of this the more folks in the economy will unleash more creativity, more opportunity, and so on and so forth. Yep. So that was the platform. Lincoln ran on it, won. That, of course, fractured the country. That's the first Reconstruction. And we had a family food fight, the Civil War, right? And then you come up to the second Reconstruction. And right before that, you had, the beginning of the 19th century, you had these immigrants from Europe who came here, Italians and Poles and Polish and other people. And they were not welcome, by the way. And Jews, they were not welcome. I mean, these were light and dark-skinned Europeans, but they just were not traditional Europeans.
You weren't from here.
And they were called horrible things. And now they've been completely, we let them go from the streets to the suites. And of course, they're driving economic growth, early 20th century. We get to the second Reconstruction, the civil rights movement. And there's this huge debate about, should blacks and whites have separate water fountains? And should blacks be able to walk into a building? This is stupid stuff. Should blacks have a right to vote? And by the way, the Electoral College is still based on a slavery model, because the reason they wanted blacks to have to be considered 3/4 of a man was that you wouldn't get a full vote. So it's still, actually, again, people find it shocking. Don't trust me. Go check it yourself. That's why the Electoral College doesn't work with one vote, one person. But anyway, let's focus on what we can control. So blacks said, look, can I go to water fountain? Can I get on any bus I like, right? Dr. King had the right sort of message. I'm here to redeem the soul of America, not to say black people. I'm here to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty. That helping blacks come up, he said, is good for the country.
The whole country, right?
Yeah, and it sends a message to everybody in the world that we're a beacon, a light on the hill. We're a place for opportunity. Come one, come all. As long as you want to contribute, you're legal, you're ethical, you're honest, you're so on and so forth. And then that debate caused him to get assassinated, right? This was a decade of assassinations. John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. You think we have problems now? Like, there was a whole decade of assassinations.
Vietnam's going on, all of it. Yeah.
And then John Kennedy pivoted to Johnson, actually a Southerner, had good common sense and decided he was going to become the revolutionary freedom fighter. 4 civil rights bills from Johnson, 4. One on the eve of Dr. King's assassination, Open Housing Act. And that fueled the economy. Then reaction to that was Nixon, Johnson, Kennedy, Johnson. The overreaction to that was, and Kennedy and King, was Nixon being elected, who said, put on the brakes to all this. We call it wokeism, if you want to call it that, in that era. And he said, we'll do affirmative action, but we're going to let white women have it. I'm not, by the way, everybody, nothing I'm saying is racial or even remotely debatable. Just go do your research. You'll be stunned how basic this is. So white women were allowed to go use affirmative action. I say, by the way, God bless them. I'm good with that. And women in 1972, including white women, were not allowed. Your mother, my mother, could not get a bank account, could not get a loan unless her husband co-signed it in 1972.
Think how short a time that is, too.
1972, not 18.
It's nothing.
Nothing. So we had this debate about, oh my God, this is wokeism. This is anyway. The common sense won, and women are a third of the GDP today, $7-8 trillion. We'd be a third rate, also ran nation without women. So Blacks movement helped women of all races and creed to come up, and I say, bravo. Now we're in the third Reconstruction and the second economic Reconstruction, 2020 to 2030, in my opinion, where everything changes again. And we've got another question to answer, which is, are we better together? I mean, and because demographics are destiny, a lot of people are afraid, don't want to admit it, but they're afraid that for the first time, this country is looking a little different. And in the next 10 or 20 years, you're going to have a majority of minorities. And I'm only afraid of that if these minorities are not financially literate, if don't have the deepest level of education and exposure they can have, if they're not connected to free enterprise and capitalism, if they're not feeling like they are part of democracy and they want to play by the rules, stop at red lights, pay their taxes, respect their elders, do all that's required of an American citizen in exchange for a reasonable shot at success or failure at their own merit. Because the most dangerous person in the world is a person with no hope. There's not enough police to save you if you have a group of people who have no hope. And that is, once again, it is documented. It's not debatable. You're outnumbered and overwhelmed by people who don't have anything to live for. There's another opportunity, though, which is to turn the bottom 33%, Chris, into capitalists. Which, by the way, to your question and my answer, long answer, we've been doing this since the beginning of America. And certainly in the 19th and 20th centuries, the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, the poor at the bottom have gotten a shot at coming up the ladder and becoming wealthy at the top. I was talking to a billionaire friend earlier today, and he was saying, some Democrats say, capitalism is evil and they want to be socialists. And I said, well, that's wrong. Even if you want to distribute money like a socialist, you got to first collect it like a capitalist. But I said to my friend, but I don't think they really mean that. I think what they really mean, they're voicing people's frustration. And when they say they hate rich people, I would say you hate rich people until you become rich. What you hate is a game system, a system that no matter how hard you work, no matter what you
can't win.
You feel like you can't win. It's just rigged against you. And so we need everybody who's able-bodied, capable, and hardworking to be on this wheel with their arms against their shoulders against the wheel, rowing this oar called American GDP, gross domestic product, economic prosperity. In 1959, last stat on this, America was 90% white, Chris. 1951, sorry. America was 90% white. Today, America is 40% black and brown. Today. And within 10 years, it'll be a slight majority of minorities. This is spooking a lot of people as this demographic becomes radically different. And it doesn't need to scare anybody. This is about expanding the table.
I think people have just decided they want a different argument. They want to argue instead of, to your point earlier, before we got on, we agree on this, much. We don't agree on this much, but we'll focus on this much.
Race has always been a stalking horse. Race has always been a placeholder for more important issues. In 1600s, Chris, blacks and whites were both indentured servants.
100%. Yeah.
People don't know that. Blacks and whites were both enslaved. They're just poor. And blacks and whites were getting along together. They became friends. They ran away together. They ran away in West Jamestown, Virginia. They were caught. And the overseer told the boss, we got a problem. They're getting along. They're friends. And the boss said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, we can have a race riot. We cannot have a class riot because we're the class, boss. So
there's more of them than us.
Exactly. And they said, look, so they told the poor whites, look, you're going to get 2 more years of indentured servitude for running away. And we're going to make the black people servants for life. That was the beginning of slavery. And then they said to the poor whites, now you're in charge of the black people because you're white like us. That was the first time that the racial word white was ever used. In 5 billion years of the world's history, 4 billion years of organism life, 200 million years of Neanderthal life, a couple 100,000 years of modern life, and 6,000 years of, you want to call it, awakening, 3,000 years since Christ. In all these years, the racial word white was created because of economic insecurity in the 1600s. And now you've had blacks and whites at each other's throats, poor blacks and poor whites, for no good reason, at each other's throats. And I think somebody was playing them. And I think that people are continuing to play games with triggering issues to this day because it's easy. And people are insecure and they're fearful about the future. I understand that. But we just gotta decide that we're better together. I want every white person to be successful. I want everybody who can be successful to be massively successful. I want every Asian, Latino, Native American, Indian. I even want you to be successful, Chris.
Well, that's a mutual. And what's funny is I saw you, I was a week ago, 10 days ago, and Kernan on CNBC is pushing you on DEI. And then I found your white paper or your business plan for America saying I was never DEI, I was D&I. Well, I believe you. I didn't go back and look and see it. I just believe you.
But you're being kind, Chris. I went further than that. I said, kill it. You don't like DEI? Kill it. I don't care. It's been weaponized. It's been made political. I just kill it. Who cares?
But the influence that you have for someone like yourself to say the E didn't make sense is going against the grain. It could be viewed as a little controversial. So tell me why you believe it's the D and I is the what. I'm with you. I agree. It's opportunity, not equal outcomes. I mean, that's a simple way to say it, but how about your words?
I like math because it doesn't have an opinion.
Amen.
The math is simple. McKinsey and Company of thousands of other reports have confirmed the most profitable companies in America of the Fortune 500 are the most diverse.
I have the D.
They have confirmed that the biggest economies in the United States of America, cities, regions, are the most diverse. America is the most diverse nation in the world. Every race of people within our borders. The two most diverse states in America are California and New York. The two biggest economies in America are California and New York. The biggest economy in the world is the United States of America. This is another reason why I think we'll continue to outshine China, even though they have 4x our population or more, we'll still outshine them because they don't have diversity. They don't celebrate it. They don't have another view. They have one view. We've got a world view. The world that we can go and come and reflect everything in the marketplace as we see the world from many different perspectives because we are the most diverse place. The most diverse place in the southern states, the traditional South, is the city I'm in right now, Atlanta, Georgia. It's the 10th largest economy in the United States of America, $580 billion, depending on what number you look at. Same size economy as Singapore, where I was speaking 3 weeks ago, which I think is a model for the world, by the way, of inclusive economics, which, as you know, I'm very big on. And so if you take the 5 states around Georgia, you can take 3 of the states and put them inside together, the economy of Atlanta, together and still have room. That's balling. The city of Atlanta's economy is bigger than every state around it because they have an old business plan based on what they're against, not what they're for. They refuse to change, refuse to embrace diversity, refuse to move forward, refuse to say that we're just better together. They actually argue against their own interests. There are a couple states that absolutely their rallying cry is, we hate the government. We hate the government. We hate the government. Get the government out of our lives. We hate welfare. And the biggest states for transfer payments from the federal government are literally those states. It's financial illiteracy. How do you not know that you got $2 coming in for every dollar going out? How do you not know that? How do you argue against your own interests? I'm not saying that somebody should be dependent on the government. I'm saying if you are dependent on the government, you should probably shut up.
Or become not dependent on the government.
Or not depend on the government by inviting some of these people you don't like to help to bring you some cool restaurants and some cool music and some cool tech and some cool industries and some cool economy. I mean, do people know that Steve Jobs, I have a podcast myself called Money and Wealth. I just did an episode on When Smart People Fail. And I talked about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs was Jordanian. He was from Jordan. His father was from Jordan. The Middle East people, hello. And he was adopted because because his mother was Caucasian, his father was Jordanian. The grandparents did not want the daughter to marry a Jordanian, so they put the kid up for adoption. And Steve got bounced around because nobody wanted him. And he ended up with the Jobs family. in Silicon Valley. I mean, look, you can't make this up. I think it's like 40% of the Fortune 500 companies are immigrants.
So let's double click on the immigration, because to your point, we way over index on immigrant entrepreneurs and success of those folks. Way over index. We
Yeah.
see in our own portfolio. And what's funny is what you said earlier about everyone wants to be here except us. They're all really proud to be American, more proud than so-called Americans. But the interesting thing about what we can agree on is we need those immigrants. It's a really like third rail. Like, how do you have this conversation on a business podcast? But we could agree that there are some who aren't helping the country.
Of course.
Where do you draw this line? How do you think about that?
Let's address this directly. Look, I believe in the bum factor. 20% of white folks are bums. 20% of black people are bums. 20% of people in my family are bums. 20% of Republicans and Democrats are bums. I mean, if you want to go start looking for people to blame for your problems, you don't have to go picking on immigrants. You can go next door to your neighbor or look in your own family. There is no perfect. So if there's an immigrant who is illegal, who's immoral, who's done bad things, kick them out.
We should be embracing the ones who are.
Which is the overwhelming majority. Like, look, I'm not for illegal immigration. In fact, I am against illegal immigrants, to be clear. But why is somebody coming from Mexico to California? California was Mexico, by the way. I used to joke, they're just coming to get their stuff. But anyway, why is somebody coming from Mexico to California for a better life? They're not coming to steal from you.
Well, it's back to the economic argument.
It's an economic argument. Now, I'm not, when you come here, you got to come the right way and all that kind of stuff. But they're coming here for the same reason that Eastern European immigrants came here, the same reason that Italians and Poles came here, the same reason whoever. By the way, Europeans are immigrants to America. The only people indigenous to this country are Native American Indians.
Right. Indians.
Black folks are unintended immigrants. We got on the wrong boat.
All right. Well, so this is either the clumsiest or the best segue ever, because here we are arguing about tariffs. We got to build stuff in the country. We won't go wait on the rabbit hole of since Liberation Day, as he called it. But what's interesting is the argument of, will we as in Americans do these jobs?
Agricultural jobs?
Or manufacturing jobs or whatever jobs.
Oh.
But you also talk about economic success, like giving people a job and giving opportunity. There is an argument here that says people should want a job.
Let me just go right to the data. And again, I'm not saying better or worse. I'm just giving you the data. About 40% of agriculture in this country are undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, 100%.
You go to California, and it's as much as 75 to 80%. My guess is Florida too, right? So my friends would joke, I'm not going to pick no grapes, right? You know, and so I'm not sure who we're going to have
do these jobs.
Drive the agricultural economy. Yes, some of this can be done through robotics and the automations. Yes, but first of all, we're not there yet. Hello, we're not there yet. And you can't do all of it, right? No different than you need plumbers and electricians. You can't AI that, right? By the way, again, shocking number. We need about 80,000 plumbers a year and about 40,000 electricians a year.
And these are good jobs, good paying jobs.
These are great jobs. They pay $60,000 to $110,000 a year. But let's stay focused again on this. So first of all, if we're going to do this, okay, I'm just saying let's have a plan. Now, the election's over. The president's my president. I want him to win. I need him to win. If he wins, I win. If he loses, I lose. So let's be clear. I need him to win. I was in the Treasury Department yesterday. I was there 3 weeks ago. I'll be there 2 weeks from now. I'm trying to give them my business plans. Please steal my ideas. Whatever works, right? But I have a calculator on my desk, right? And sometimes the math is not mathing. If you wanted to have, first of all, I'm going to go to a place that you'd get to anyway. Tariffs. Tariffs, in the simplest way I can describe this, I did it 4 times on TV last week, but I'm going to say it again to your audience. Tariffs are a tax on an American importer of goods, and by extension, a price increase on consumers, because this importer will likely have to pass on the price increase. It is not a tax on a foreign government. The foreign government is not paying the tariff. When that price goes from $1 for whatever that is to $1.80, when it hits the import station, the importer's got to pay the $1.80. And unless they are just benevolent, they're going to pass that on to the consumer. So that's going to inflate prices at your kitchen table. This is just simple math. Now, you say, well, okay, but this is the price we're going to pay for fixing trade deficits and creating an internally generated economy. Number one, a trade deficit for the biggest economy in the world is a compliment. It suggests a very healthy economy because China would love to have an internally generated consumer economy. I mean, most countries can't do it. We've got an economy where 70% of the GDP is consumer spending. That's not China. So we don't produce a lot of stuff we used to produce in the old industrial age. It's too expensive.
But you must agree at some level, the stuff we still do produce, it isn't fair on the other side of that, right? In other words, if we go to Europe, you don't see a lot of General Motors cars or Ford cars for a reason, right? And I guess what I'm curious about is, do you think is the argument, this is silliness at the extremes that's been taken, but as reciprocal trade, getting some fairer world, does that make any sense?
What I'm not going to do is litigate a decision the president has not already made. I know you find it shocking. I have some guardrails. I'm actually not, I do have no intention of getting out ahead of the president and saying, look, he has a right to try things. He's the president, he was elected. And he's been talking about tariffs since 1980. So he's going to do it. So the country just needs a colonic. Like, let's just flush all this through our system. I'm not going to go and say for Europe and for this and for that, and how does it relate to this country? If the president believes one of the positives of a tariff, it could be used as a blunt force negotiating tactic to get a country to behave in a way that you want it to behave. If he can get that done in 2 months and get an advantage for America or level the playing field, God bless him. And if he can get that done, he should be saluted. Okay. So I've said that right now. I'm saying this.
Got it.
But the other thing that's been said is that we need to bring manufacturing back to the U.S.
Right.
Okay. So let me explain how this works to others, because Chris, you know this. In order for this to actually happen, for this to be serious, the president would have had to say to the Fortune 500 companies and all the big banks and the boards of those companies and their governors committees, a year before the election, I'm going to be president. Trust me, in a year, I'll be president. Here, I'm going to industrialize part of the economy. Here are the 10 industries I'm going to hyper-focus on.
Yep.
Here are the areas the country I'm going to hyper-focus on, rural and whatever, who need an economy again. Here's the areas that I want you to focus on. And I want you to get your governance committees and your credit committees and your capital allocation committees to make a decision and then talk to your bankers and then go negotiate with the cities and counties and be ready to make commitments to bring these industries, either old or new ones, into America. And while you're doing that, know that I'm going to take the Department of Education and I'm going to use it as a retooling facility for a whole generation of people who used to be in the Industrial Revolution, who now need to be in the AI revolution and the technology revolution. And I'm also going to give them trades. I'm going to take 100 million Americans and give them a new purpose within 2 years of my administration. So I need you to make these investments and we're going to make some commitments as I announce these tariffs. It's going to take you 3 years to get that thing executed. Meanwhile, we're going to get people retrained. The whole country's going to be excited like it's after World War II, the Marshall Plan.
Yep.
It was the Marshall Plan. So everybody gets excited because, by the way, we had a lot of debt after World War II, just like we have debt now. We have a large debt to GDP ratio, right? And we worked it off because we invested in the returning GIs, which, by the way, 99% went to white people, oddly enough, not the black GIs. But anyway, they got a college education subsidized by the government. They got a chance to buy their own home subsidized by the government. They got a trade for the future subsidized by the government. And this subsidy, this deficit in investment, fueled the American middle class for 30 years.
So let's boil this down, because you've got this really cool I thought it was cool or interesting. Cool's the wrong word. Your business plan, I think that's what you called it, right? It's on your
Yeah,
website.
the business plan for America, and underneath that is the business plan for Black America and women America and Asian Americans and rural.
So sticking to the America one, just because of the sake of time, you got it. It's not that many bullet points, and they're spot on. Give us the quick, summary here. And to me, these conversations are always about getting people to think.
Yeah.
And at least we get some people to think. And to your point about everyone put their shoulder against the wheel to turn, there's a lot more that we agree on that we don't. And I think your bullet points or your points are hard to disagree with.
Yeah, this is probably not very politic to say on your podcast, but a good friend of mine, I was explaining my vision 10 years ago, and I back then I talked way too long. Everything sounded like Martin Luther King's speech. And he looked at me and said, John, if you can't explain this to me as if your old, slightly senile auntie can understand it, it's not clear in your own head. And so I don't use 20 words when 2 will do. So I'm gonna tell people, go to Dream Forward on the Operation Hope website, download the business plans for America, read them yourself. It's open source information from me to you. And as long as you're not using it for commercial purposes, knock yourself out. Otherwise, they're copy protected. Now, the plan essentially says diversity is the greatest R&D, research and development tool this country has ever had. It is our advantage for the rest of the world. And it can drive 2 to 3% additional GDP every year through 2053 is when I calculated it out, right? And as one example I gave, on the Black business plan, because Blacks are the bottom of the economic pyramid of all groups, right? So to take the worst group and work backwards, then poor whites are after that, and Latinos, et cetera. People don't know that poor whites is the biggest poverty group in this country. But take Blacks, for example. If the Citigroup report 2020 to 2020, to 2020, if you just stop racism against Blacks, and home loans, mortgages, things like that, small business loans, that cost the country $16 trillion of GDP. Just that, in 20 years. So just knock it off. Put that aside for a minute. If the government had a deathbed conversion and decided they wanted to do reparations and welfare and all the stuff for Black people, it won't happen. By the year of 2053, that's $300 billion to $600 billion. Put that aside for a moment. I'm not advocating for this solution. I'm just saying that's the number. But if Blacks just increase their credit score 100 points between now and 2053, that's $750 billion of wealth creation, plus it pops GDP. If Blacks then became homeowners, went from 44% to 60%, that's $800 billion of GDP. Those two numbers are 1.5, 1.6 trillion, right? Then you add AI, that's another trillion. Then you add business acquisition for all these baby boomers trying to sell their businesses at the same time, because you're going to have the largest group. You're going to have, as you know this as an investor, you got $100 trillion of wealth transfer. About $15 trillion of that are businesses that no kids wants. The kids don't want the businesses. The wives, husbands don't want the business. They want the cash, the bonds, the houses, the stocks. They don't want the businesses. So go buy them. That's $3.5 trillion in comparison to the best number of $300 billion to $600 billion from the federal government. So the real message here is capitalism and free enterprise is the unlock. And if you do that, you pop GDP across the country. That's just African Americans, by the way. Then you combine that with what women can do, what poor whites can do. We talked about retooling, right? What Native American Indians can do, largest alcoholism rate in this country, by the way, Native American Indians, depression. By the way, number one group dying in this country, poor white men from loss, aspiration, and opioid addiction, depression.
Yep.
So this is not complicated. The problem with this message is it's too rational. You can't get people worked up. You can't get people worked up with what I just told you.
When everyone agrees, right?
I mean, if you're trying to get people to back you, to get all excited, you got to convince them there's a problem and it's somebody else. Now, I guess that's one approach. My approach is I'm just trying to solve the problem. And I think that here's what I know. This world was made from love. Hate's a byproduct. Badness is failed goodness. The darkness is defined by light, not the other way around. If anybody's religious or spiritual listening to this, they know that Lucifer is a fallen angel. God gave the devil permission to exist. So the devil's a punk, all right? So there's never been a group of bad people who've succeeded in the history of the world, Chris, for any more than a few years.
Sure, it burns out fast.
It burns out fast. So Hope is the business plan. All I'm saying is, do we want to be speaking Mandarin in 20 years or not? That's the question. We end where we started. If we don't work this out and we agree that we're family, China will lead the world in 20 years and we'll be speaking Mandarin because that's what they want. They only can win if we screw up. They only win if we trip ourselves up, if we get in this food fight that we have mastered. So,
give me, the audience, those who are probably in the business world already, the ways we can help. That 100 points, that 50 points of credit score. We actually have a portfolio company that actually does this for people, but people probably look at that as trying to take advantage of folks when you're trying to educate them. What could regular folks do? I know it sounds like almost, again, a business podcast, talk about volunteering or giving back or places you direct my hours in a week that I could actually help this. What would it be?
You know why this is appropriate for your podcast? It's the same thing that I told the Secretary of the Treasury. This country is not a country, it's an idea.
100%.
And it runs on sentiment. Wall Street runs on sentiment. Going public is a narrative, a storytelling. The stock market is irrational. Look at the last 2 weeks. So if we don't get the sentiment right? If I don't feel good about you, if you don't feel good about me, if we don't feel optimistic, everything stops. So this is a business conversation. So we want people to feel empowered, to not feel immobilized, to stop screaming at the TV and start to walk down into school to teach financial literacy. Send a note to your congressman or congresswoman saying you want financial literacy for all legislation, bipartisan, Republican and Democrats, and you want the president to sign in the law. This is a civil rights issue of this generation. This is something we can do. Let's figure out our massive agreements versus our minor, modest disagreements. And let's obsess on those things. Go volunteer in your school. Go volunteer in your school board. Go volunteer in you don't like your federal government politics? Go to the local government. That's where GDP is anyway. Go help a minority or women entrepreneur, small business owner come up. Mentor somebody. We have at Operation Hope, you can go to Operation Hope's website, volunteer for financial literacy in 42 states. Volunteer to mentor a business owner that we partner with Shopify on through 1 Million Black Business Initiative. We've already created, nurtured, supported 450,000 Black businesses. That's teaching somebody how to fish with technology, not giving them a fish that is not sustainable. So volunteer that. You're an accountant, a lawyer, you're a banker, you're a marketing professional, you're an IT tech, listening to this, watching this, you're an investment banker. Your expertise is useful. Give us 2 hours. Volunteer to the Time Bank at Operation Hope. And by the way, you'll help the business, but you'll also help yourself. You're going to feel good and better about yourself. You're also going to meet somebody who you'd never meet, culturally different, and you're going to realize, you know what, that person's not so bad.
We're pretty much the same. Yeah.
I taught financial literacy. I was 9 years old in Compton, and everybody in my neighborhood, they really hated white people because their experience with a white person was some white cop throwing a black kid against a squad car because he was afraid of this kid because he wanted to get back to a suburban house. And I understand him being afraid. I went to school and my white teachers would buy what I was selling through mail order. So I had a good relationship with my white female teachers. My white principal would buy what I was selling or listen to my crazy ideas. And a white banker came in my classroom and taught financial literacy. He was from Bank of America. And I had never heard of financial literacy, 1977. He didn't want to be there. We didn't want him there. He came once a week for 6 weeks. He was forced to come there by the Bank of America and the Community Reinvestment Act. And he clearly didn't want to be there. First week, he had an attitude. We had an attitude. Second week, he showed up. He's like, you know what? You kids are not so bad. You remind me of my kids. We're like, well, you're not so bad for a white dude. The third week, we're telling jokes. He's telling jokes. Fourth week, I'm wearing a suit just like him. Fifth week, sixth week, bonded. I'm completely converted. I said, what do you do for a living? And how'd you get rich legally? He said, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. I said, sir, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but if it's legal and you're financing it,
sign me up.
Sign me up. That's who I am today. He saved my life. And so I had no resentment with white people. I had no problem with white people. I saw them as helping me help myself. And I felt better and he felt better.
Back to sentiment.
Back to sentiment.
Well, as always, I can feel like I can actually beat Joe Rogan because I go for 3 hours. I talk to you because there's so much to talk about. But I know my audience will.
You never want to be the old guy in the club, Chris. So before you kick me out, I'm going to leave. I'm going to drop the mic and walk off the stage.
No, your message there at the end, look, financial literacy is the key. We're all in this together.
And AI literacy, financial literacy and artificial
Now,
intelligence.
you're right. You better sign up for that too. But actually, we as those who are listening can go do that so easily. Yeah, don't point to your team to go do it. Go do it yourself.
And when I say send a letter to your congressman or congresswoman or a senator or the White House, please know I'm at the U.S. Treasury Department, and it's not a hard sell. Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent's a good man. I like him. I've known him for a decade. And he and I are trying to work up some positive scheme around making financial literacy serious in this country. Now, he can't do legislation. He's a cabinet member. But I'm trying to inspire and encourage financial literacy for all legislation. Me and the CEO of Walmart are co-chairs of Financial Literacy for All. Me and the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, are co-chairs of AI Ethics Council. Together, we're trying to make financial literacy the civil rights issue of this generation, and AI literacy the silver rights issue of this generation. From the streets to the suites, a return to prosperity for all of us. And I believe we can do it. But we need the public's help. The public have got to let it be known this is what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an idea, it's sentiment, and we can do it at a grassroots level.
Yes. And we can figure out that we are better together. Yes.
John Hope Bryant, just like it was the last time. It's inspiring, it's challenging, and it's really great to hear your voice on this topic. We will repost, as we said, your business plan for America, Dream Forward, really cool.
Let me say one last thing for your audience. Anybody who still thinks they got me figured out, please hear this. Yes, Democrats, Johnson, Kennedy did civil rights legislation, and we can talk about that. And Bill Clinton, I think, was a model president for lowering the deficit, increasing income and wealth creation, and he was a Democrat. And most successful presidents were Democratic presidents over the last 75 years economically. And then they say, oh, see, I got him. He's a Democratic advocate. No. And a Republican freed the slaves, Lincoln. And a Republican created the Martin Luther King's holiday, which was Ronald Reagan. And a Republican did more for Africa than any other president before or since, and that's my friend George W. Bush. And the Republican created affirmative action, and that was Nixon. And he was a women's rights president and an environmental president. This is about figuring out what we can do. What can we get done together? It's not about demonizing and pointing fingers and blaming somebody, because there's enough blame to go around.
Well, thank you for joining Electrifying Growth. Thanks, John O'Brien. Have a great day.
Peace and light, man. Love and light.
Same to you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of Electrifying Growth. A special thanks to this week's guest for sharing their time and insight. For more resources, inspiration, and a look inside the Edison Partners Network, sign up for our newsletter at www.edisonpartners.com. Click on the Stay in the Know button in the top right corner of our webpage. Thank you again.